There is a harsh reality about money that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The financial position you occupy today is not an accident. And unless something changes in the way you think, the way you act, and the way you understand power, it will likely be the same position you occupy 10, 20, or even 30 years from now. That may sound uncomfortable. But reality rarely cares about comfort. More than 5 centuries ago, Machiavelli recognized a pattern that still governs human ambition today. He understood that wealth is not simply about income, it is not about luck, and it is certainly not about working hard alone. Wealth follows a hierarchy, a progression, 6 distinct levels, and each level determines something far more important than the size of your bank account. It determines how much control you truly have over your life. Most people never see this structure. They move through life believing they are making independent choices while invisible forces quietly shape their decisions every day. What they fail to realize is that every level comes with its own prison, its own illusion, its own trap, a hidden barrier designed to keep people exactly where they are. The people who rise understand these traps. They study them, they anticipate them, and sometimes they use them as stepping stones to climb even higher. By the end of this video, you'll discover which level you're actually living in, why so many people remain stuck there for decades, and what separates those who stay trapped from those who steadily rise toward freedom, influence, and real power. Because the question is not whether you're playing the game. The question is whether you're winning it. Level 1. The survival stage. This is the level where fear quietly controls almost every decision you make. At this stage, life feels fragile. You wake up thinking about bills. You go to sleep thinking about bills. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a constant awareness that one unexpected event could change everything. A lost job, a medical emergency, a growing debt, a sudden expense you didn't plan for. Any one of these can push your entire life into chaos. This is not freedom. This is survival. You are living on unstable ground where your sense of security depends almost entirely on forces outside your control. Machiavelli understood a dangerous truth about power. Dependence creates weakness. The more your survival depends on other people, the less control you truly possess. At this level, your employer influences your future. Your landlord influences your stability. The bank influences your options, and the systems around you determine how much room you have to move. That is the hidden prison of the survival stage. You may believe you are making choices, but most of your choices are being made by pressure, and pressure changes people. Fear convinces you to tolerate things you would otherwise reject. You stay in toxic environments. You accept disrespect. You take on bad debt. You choose short-term relief over long-term strategy, not because you are weak, because you are trying to survive. That is how years disappear, sometimes decades. But there is something important about this stage that most people never understand. Pain can become a teacher. Every mistake reveals something. Every setback exposes a weakness. Every financial struggle shows you how the game actually works. Some people spend their lives asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" Others ask a far more powerful question. How does this system actually work? That question changes everything. Because the people who escape this level are rarely the most talented. They are rarely the most educated. They are the ones who stop seeing themselves as victims of the game and start becoming students of it. And that is where movement begins. Because once you understand the rules, you finally gain a chance to rise beyond them. Level 2. The illusion stage. This is where life starts to feel stable. At least on the surface, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. The bills get paid. There is money left at the end of the month. Maybe you have a small emergency fund, maybe a few months of savings. To someone trapped in the survival stage, this looks like success. It feels like you've finally made it. But this is where the most dangerous illusion begins. Machiavelli understood that complete weakness is not always the greatest threat. Sometimes the greatest threat is partial security. because partial security convinces you that you are safe when you are not. At this level, your income still depends entirely on your ability to work. The moment you stop producing, the money stops flowing. Nothing fundamental has changed. The structure is still fragile. The chains are simply more comfortable. And that comfort creates a trap that captures millions of people for the rest of their lives. They begin performing wealth instead of building it. They buy the newer car, upgrade the house, take the expensive vacation, fill their lives with symbols of success. Everything starts to look impressive from the outside, but appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the image, the foundation remains weak. One layoff, one recession, one bad financial decision, one difficult month. And suddenly, the distance between this level and survival becomes much smaller than it appeared. That is why this stage is so dangerous. You are no longer desperate enough to change, but you are still too dependent to be free. You exist in a strange middle ground, comfortable enough to stop growing, vulnerable enough to remain afraid. Many people spend decades here, protecting a life that only feels secure, defending a cage they have learned to call home. But eventually, a question begins to emerge, a question that changes everything. What if this comfort is not protecting you? What if it is the very thing keeping you stuck? That realization marks the beginning of something new. Because the moment you stop chasing comfort and start seeking freedom, you enter an entirely different game. And that brings us to the next stage. Level 3, the awakening stage. This is where everything begins to change. For the first time, you are no longer relying entirely on the exchange of time for money. You have built something. Maybe it's a business. Maybe it's a valuable skill that few people possess. Maybe it's a system, an investment, a source of income that continues generating value even when you're not actively working. Whatever form it takes, it gives you something you have never truly had before. Options. And options are power. Machiavelli understood this better than most. A ruler who depends completely on others has very little room to think strategically. But the moment dependency decreases, possibilities begin to appear. That is exactly what happens at this stage. You gain breathing room, mental space, the ability to think beyond tomorrow. For the first time, you can say no. No to bad opportunities, no to desperate decisions, no to situations that once felt unavoidable. You begin thinking in months instead of days, in years instead of weeks. And that shift changes everything. Because when survival stops dominating your mind, strategy finally has room to enter. This is why the awakening stage feels so powerful. You are not rich, not yet. But for the first time, you are no longer psychologically poor. You can see possibilities where others see limitations. You can see opportunities where others see obstacles. But this stage comes with its own hidden trap. A dangerous whisper begins to grow louder. You've made it. You're doing better than most people. This is enough. And for many, that is where the climb ends. They escape struggle. But they never build influence. They achieve comfort, but never reach power. They settle for improvement when they could have pursued transformation. Because moving beyond this stage requires something most people fear: risk. You must be willing to challenge the life you have built, to expand beyond what feels safe, to trade certainty for possibility, comfort for leverage, relief for growth. That is the question standing in front of you now. Do you want safety or do you want control? Because there is a massive difference between escaping hardship and building power, and that difference leads directly to the next stage, the stage where wealth stops being effort and starts becoming force. Level 4. The leverage stage. This is where the game changes completely. Until now, money has largely been tied to effort. You worked, you earned, you stopped. The income slowed down. But at this level, something fundamentally different begins to happen. Money starts becoming a force, a multiplier, a system capable of producing results far beyond the energy you personally invest. Most people spend their entire lives asking one question: how can I work more? How can I earn more hours? Get a bigger paycheck, take on more responsibility. But people who reach this stage ask a different question, a far more powerful question. How can one effort create 10 results? That is the essence of leverage, and leverage is where real power begins. At this level, assets start appearing everywhere around you. A business that no longer depends entirely on your daily involvement. Systems that continue producing value while your attention is elsewhere. Investments that compound over time. A personal brand that attracts opportunities before you even seek them. A network that opens doors most people never see. Resources begin working on your behalf. And for the first time, you stop reacting to circumstances. You begin creating them. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. True power is not the ability to respond to fortune, it is the ability to shape fortune itself. That is exactly what leverage allows you to do. Because the greatest realization at this stage is simple. Income is not power. Ownership is power. Income pays your bills. Ownership controls resources. Income solves today's problems. Ownership creates tomorrow's opportunities. Most people focus on earning. The powerful focus on controlling asset systems and influence. That distinction changes everything. You begin thinking differently. Not next month, not next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The future becomes a strategic landscape rather than an uncertain mystery. And eventually, money itself stops being the goal. It becomes a tool, a resource, a weapon, something used to buy time, freedom, access, and influence. But every level comes with a price, and this one is no exception. To rise this far, you must become more disciplined than most people, more selective, more strategic. You will have to make decisions others do not understand. You will have to walk away from opportunities that look attractive but lead nowhere. Sometimes you will have to distance yourself from people who no longer align with your future, and that is uncomfortable. Because many people want success without sacrifice, wealth without discomfort, power without criticism. But reality does not work that way. Machiavelli warned that the moment you try to please everyone, you lose the ability to think strategically. At this stage, being misunderstood becomes normal. Being judged becomes normal. Being disliked becomes normal. Because long-term vision often looks strange to people trapped in short-term thinking. And if you can tolerate that discomfort, you enter a territory few people ever reach. A place where wealth stops being security and starts becoming influence. The next stage, the dominant stage, level 5, the dominant stage. Now the game becomes serious. At this level, you are no longer simply wealthy. You are rich in the true sense of the word. Your resources have grown far beyond your immediate needs. Survival is no longer part of the conversation. You own appreciating assets, significant capital, powerful networks, access to opportunities that remain invisible to most people. And this is where something remarkable happens. Money begins transforming into influence. A single phone call can move capital. A single decision can affect the direction of a business. A single investment can shape the future of entire industries. The scale changes, the impact changes, the consequences change. Machiavelli observed this level among rulers, nobles, and power brokers of his time. These were not people who merely reacted to events. They influenced events. They shaped outcomes. They altered the choices available to others. That is the essence of dominance. But here is the truth most people never hear. This level is not peace. It is pressure at a higher altitude. Because once you arrive here, you are no longer competing with average people. You are competing with other powerful people, other empire builders, other investors, other strategic minds. The game becomes more sophisticated, the risks become larger, and mistakes become far more expensive. One bad decision can erase years of progress. One misplaced trust can create enormous damage. One poor partnership can cost far more than money. At this stage, new questions begin to appear. Questions that never existed at the lower levels. Who can you truly trust? Who values you for who you are? Who values you only for what you possess? Who is loyal and who is merely waiting for an opportunity? Power changes relationships. Success attracts admiration, but it also attracts deception. Machiavelli understood this reality better than most. The higher you rise, the more carefully you must observe people's intentions. Because threats no longer come only from below. They come from competitors, rivals, equals, people who smile in front of you while calculating behind you. And there is another price that rarely gets discussed. Many who reach this level have sacrificed comfort, approval, simplicity. Some have even compromised principles in pursuit of greater influence. That journey changes people, and eventually a difficult realization emerges. The price of power is not only what you lose along the way, it is who you become while acquiring it. Because dominance is not merely a financial transformation, it is a psychological one. And beyond even this level lies something far rarer, a stage where money itself becomes secondary, a stage where influence evolves into legacy, the final stage, the untouchable stage. Level 6. The untouchable stage. This is no longer a game of money. Money still exists, but it is no longer the thing that matters most. The numbers have become too large to provide meaning on their own. At this level, a different currency emerges. Legacy, institutions, systems, long-term influence, structures capable of surviving long after their creator is gone. This is where wealth undergoes its final transformation. It becomes force across generations. Machiavelli understood that the highest form of power is not temporary control. It is permanence. The ability to shape systems, to influence outcomes, to establish rules that continue operating decades after you have disappeared. That is what makes this level so rare. You are no longer merely playing inside the system. You are helping define the system itself. Your decisions begin affecting entire industries. Your ideas influence culture. Your actions shape policy. Your influence reaches people you will never meet. In some cases, it extends across generations. This is the territory of institutions, dynasties, empire builders, architects of influence, people whose impact remains long after their names have faded. And here we encounter one of the great paradoxes of power. The most powerful people are often the least visible. At lower levels, recognition feels valuable, attention feels important, status feels necessary. But at this level, visibility can become a liability. The truly powerful no longer need constant validation. They operate through organizations, boards, investment funds, networks, systems. Influence moves through structures rather than personalities. Their fingerprints disappear, but their effects remain everywhere. Machiavelli understood this principle perfectly. The highest rulers know when to be seen, and they know when invisibility creates greater strength. Because true mastery is not the display of power. It is the ability to exercise power without needing to display it. And eventually something profound begins to happen. Wealth stops being personal. It becomes philosophical. The questions change. No longer, how much can I accumulate? Or how much can I control? The final questions become far deeper. What survives after you? What continues operating when your name is forgotten? What impact remains when you are no longer present to receive credit? That is the real challenge of the untouchable stage. Because the final evolution of wealth is not luxury. It is meaning, not status. Meaning, not position. Meaning. The irony is almost cruel. People spend years chasing money, only to discover that money was never the destination. It was the bridge, a bridge toward influence, toward legacy, toward shaping reality itself. And very few people ever reach this point. Not because they failed to generate wealth, but because they never learned to think beyond themselves, beyond their lifetime, beyond their own desires. Yet the people who do achieve this level leave marks that endure for generations, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but almost always permanently. So where are you right now? Not where you pretend to be, not where your social media profile suggests you are, not where you hope to be someday. Where are you actually? Because once you understand these 6 levels, it becomes impossible to look at wealth the same way again. You begin to see that money has never been the real story. Control is, freedom is, power is. And that leads us to the final lesson Machiavelli would want you to understand. Most people believe advancement is determined by intelligence. They believe the smartest people inevitably rise. Others believe success belongs to the lucky, the fortunate, the people born with better opportunities. But history tells a different story. Again and again, the people who climb are not necessarily the most intelligent, not necessarily the luckiest, and not always the most talented. What separates them is something far more powerful: hunger. The relentless desire to move beyond their current condition, the refusal to remain where they are. Because every level offers comfort, every level offers excuses, every level offers a reason to stop climbing. The people who remain trapped spend their lives searching for comfort, searching for approval, searching for security. They want certainty, they want protection, they want guarantees. But the people who rise pursue something different. They pursue options, because options create freedom. They pursue independence, because independence creates strength. They pursue control over their own lives, because control creates power. That is the difference, and it is a difference that compounds over decades. When you look back across all 6 levels, a deeper pattern emerges. The journey was never about becoming rich. It was never simply about accumulating more money. Money was only the tool. The real journey was something else entirely. A journey from dependence to choice, from choice to leverage, from leverage to influence, from influence to legacy. That is the progression. That is the game. And according to Machiavelli, the ultimate purpose of wealth is not possession. It is freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to refuse, the freedom to act according to your own vision rather than someone else's demands. Because the highest form of wealth is not having more. It is needing less permission, less dependence, less control from outside forces, and more ability to shape the reality around you. That is what true power has always been. Not ownership for its own sake, not status for its own sake, but the ability to determine the direction of your own life. And perhaps that leaves you with one final question. If your current level remains unchanged for the next 10 years, will you be satisfied with where it leads?